Hi, everyone. I believe this is going to be part three of a series that I've been calling Mental Distancing. Before we get started, you'll notice there's a bit of a raspiness to my voice. I've had a sore throat for the past few days. Hopefully, it's not COVID-19. Do not have a fever or any of the other symptoms. Breathing is normal. Seems to be confined right up here. I'm not usually one to have allergies, but I did have to work on a chainsawing a tree um, Friday afternoon and Saturday. Now the sore throat started to come on before that. I think the smoke of the chainsaw and the sawdust might have just irritated my throat even more than before. Um, I have a pretty good immune system, so I have no doubt that in a few days I'll be fine. But that will happen. It gets tickled sometimes, right there. Right on the left-hand side there gets a little tickled. Anyway, um, I've been kind of hesitating with this talk. I promised a third talk at the end of my second talk on mental distancing, and so I'm going to give it a shot. If after playing it to myself, I feel like I've provided something useful, I'll post it, and you'll obviously be seeing this. And if not, then none of this will matter to you. Excuse me. You know what? I'm going to go get some water. Uh, hold on a second. Okay, I'm back. So let's give this a go. um, so in the first video, I was talking about how mental distancing, the way I'm using it here, is referring to sort of a stepping back of your attention from your own thoughts. Thoughts are arising, thoughts are happening. But most of us, just about all of us on this planet, identify with those thoughts, that those are our thoughts. In fact, it's more than that. Those thoughts comprise our sense of me. You know, I am Vincent. I am, and fill in the roles that you play. And when you introduce yourself to somebody, you say, "Hey, I am Vincent. Nice to meet you." And then when somebody says, "Hey, Vincent, you've graduated," because now they have a story about you. And so the story of you that you have created for yourself that include your name and your history, your memories and your belief systems, your identifications and the roles you play are the things that we tell other people, you know. So tell me about yourself. Well, what do you do? Have you ever answered that question and said, "I can't because I'm empty"? Try that sometime at a party. But that would be more true than rehashing your story. And where is that story? The story is really a conglomeration of thoughts. Independent thoughts, yet somewhat, well, maybe not independent, somewhat correlated, codependent thoughts, all kind of somewhere. We have a story, and we tell ourselves the story over and over and over and over and over again. The story becomes ingrained, and the older you get, the stronger the story gets, and the more you add on to the story. And so the first part of mental distancing is to recognize you're not your story, that there's no me. And the way to do that is just to observe the fact that you can see your thoughts, that you can observe your thoughts. That's a big step. I would say stop this video right now and just take a few moments and meditate. Allow thoughts to arise, but notice that there's an apparent there's observation of those thoughts happening. It's so easy to get trapped in language. Language, by its very nature, is dualistic. This seems to appear to be very dualistic by its very nature. It's how we interact with the world. But that doesn't mean we have to believe that this is reality, that this is true. Although that's going to be the point of this third video, that it is true, that this reality is all that is, except it doesn't necessarily mean that it's any more or less true than the emptiness that you are. Just take a few moments right now, stop the video, and just notice that there's an observing of your own thoughts. That's okay. I'm going to keep going. So pause your video now. Okay, did you try it? Did you notice that there's an awareness of thoughts? See, now you investigate the awareness of thoughts. Oh, that's interesting. Well, what is this awareness? What is this awareness that's investigating the thoughts, that sees the thoughts? Because if the thoughts are arising, you can't be those thoughts. They're objects of perception. So this is what I talked about in the first video. But then we start getting into, in the second video, the fact that what is this awareness itself? One of my dogs, hold on a second. Okay, I'm back. One of my dogs is very nervous right now. And usually this happens because she somehow senses a storm coming. And I was just looking at my weather app, and there is some rain on the way, but not till tomorrow morning. So I don't know if she's picking up on this, 15 to 20 hours in advance, or there's something going on with her. I don't know. But she's now laying under my desk, panting away in her nervousness. Point is of the second video is that once after you recognize that your thoughts are not you, there's still a sense of I amness. There's still a sense of an I. Maybe not, it's not as local as it was before, but there is a sense of I am. And this is a classic point of investigation in both Zen and Advaita, in non-dual practices. Investigating that. What am I? What is this I? And if you notice, it's much more subtle than the me, because there's that sense of aliveness, that sense of beingness, that sense of awareness. She's trapped in my cords under this. Hey, you all right? Hold on a second. I have to make sure she doesn't pull the cords down there, and I'll lose everything. There's the sense of I, and I am this. And as I mentioned in video 2, there is a book out there called I is the Door, and some of the classic non-dual teachers, Ramana Maharshi, Nisargadatta, Yogananda, and others, they all point to investigating I, tracing the I to its source. Where is this I coming from? And that's where I was kind of leading you back. And so in your meditation, once you make the separation between the me, your thoughts, and the observer, now observe the observer. And here's where it gets interesting. I ask you, can you find the observer? That's a really good point of investigation and meditation. Can you find the observer? Investigate the I thought. The I is the observer that we're talking about. Can you find an observer? Spoiler alert, you won't. I mean, you might say, "Oh, it's me," but now back to identification with your beliefs about who you are. But if you really investigate this I, which arises moment by moment by moment by moment as we interact with the world, that sense of aliveness is this I. That sense of aliveness creates this world as we perceive it. And yet, that's not quite far enough, which is the point of this video. Because what happens when you investigate this, or allow yourself to work through a process that allows you to facilitate the seeing of this, there's usually some sort of transforming experience, sometimes known as a mystical experience. And this is very interesting because I'll share with you. Uh, I used to study with John Dido, Laurie Roshi up at Zen Mountain Monastery in upstate New York, about 10 miles west of Woodstock, New York. And there's a beautiful monastery up there. And he was my teacher for about 15 years before I actually switched teachers and moved out west to study with this other teacher. And geez, I forgot what I was going to say about John Dido. Oh, I remember. So I was participating in a retreat. There's a week-long silent retreat. And is one of those retreats where there was a student that was sort of being elevated to senior student. They sort of an assistant teacher, so to speak. I mean, there's been enough recognition, enough quote unquote understanding, grokking of what this student was to be able to be placed in somewhat of a teacher position. And I remember she was giving a talk, and in the talk, everything just fell away. And I just started laughing and laughing and laughing because what I had realized that there is no me and there is no I, there's just this. And it was I just started laughing. Not There was still enough of a sense of self to realize that maybe cackling out loud and laughing out loud might not have been appropriate. But I was snickering in my seat on the meditation cushion. And that just and this was like the last day of the retreat. And this is in upstate New York. And I was actually flying back to Mississippi where I was living and did live for about 7 years. And I remember being on the plane. This laughter just kept on going on the plane. Now, a lot of the laughter was not verbally articulated, but there was a lot of giggling going on. There's just the body itself was laughing because there was a grokking of how simple it all was. It was the cosmic joke. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you about, and maybe a couple pitfalls to that. And we'll see how this unfolds. The unfortunate thing about it is after about a week, this went on for about a week, this laughing, this simplicity, how the utter simplicity of realizing what it was that I am, and I say I am, which was what it was that I am, was empty. And was not only empty, it was this. And I lost it. Because my mind came back in after about a week and said, that couldn't have been it. It was too simple. My mind, I had an idea that what we think of as a mystical experience was some sort of divine intervention, some something with bells and whistles and fireworks, and it took me a long time to get past that idea, to even, and even worse, I forgot the whole awakening that had occurred, because that's what it was. It was an awakening. I forgot it for a long time until several years ago there was another reawakening. And so we have to be really careful when we talk about the mystical experience. Oh, and here comes one of my other dogs. Hello. Hello. The one under the desk we named Katsu. And this one is new. She's a year old. This is Athena. She's going to go lay down. See, I had an idea what a mystical experience was supposed to look like. And that was a mystical experience. But the idea of mysticism is that there's supposed to be something else happening. And here's the issue. The mystical experience is not an experience at all. It's only an experience to the I that comes back later and retrospectively says, oh, there was an experience. Oh. But when that happens, the mystical experience is lost. Now, there was a reawakening over here. I had what I can call a mystical experience. One of the pitfalls of that is there was a grasp afterwards. There was a grasping of it because it was the I that wanted to have another mystical experience as deep and profound as the last one. And the irony is, as long as there was an I grasping for a mystical experience, there would never be a mystical experience. Because in order to have what is a mystical experience is the falling away of the I. It's so totally counterintuitive. When the I comes back, there might be a recognition of the transformation, the realization that unfolded. And then, depending upon the strength of one's practice and how strong your own mind is, in my first case, I ended up forgetting about it. I doubted it. In the second case, there was no doubt, but the I was still coming back to try to grasp. I want more of that. And so I chased it. And it has taken some time to really investigate that chasing, that seeking, that grasping, that wanting. Now, what happens when the I really falls away? Now, I'm going to try to use language to describe something that cannot be described. In the first chapter of the I Ching, Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu said, "The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. It cannot be spoken of." But when the I falls away, there is, to some extent, for lack of a better phrase, an expansion of consciousness. And the more that consciousness expands, the thinner it gets until consciousness completely, observer completely, awareness completely, the I completely falls away. Like a drop of water returning to the ocean. What happens to that drop? disappears. It becomes the ocean. So what we think of as a mystical experience is not an experience for the I, but rather it's the complete annihilation of, wrong term, complete dropping of, complete letting go of the sense of I. And in the end, there's nothing. There's nothing. And at some point, the I will start to reform and be reborn, born again. The I will be reborn, but with the recognition, oh, what I am is that divine nothingness. Again, I'm using words. It is that divine emptiness. It's that emptiness. It is that. Now, in my case, there was still some dualistic, because I had a very interesting experience, because mine included the falling away of the I, and then a reemerging of the I. But it's like I was looking for a coin. It's like there was a sense of straddling the edge of a coin, the razor's edge. And on the one side, there was nothing. And on the other side, there was everything. And it was the experience that I went through was just very, very interesting. And there was the complete understanding that form and emptiness were the same. And yet, there is the apparent difference between the two. So I remember there were other people around when this happened, and I remember saying, "Oh," and I'd move. It was an interesting. There was some movement back and forth, back and forth. And now, in retrospect, I see that it still wasn't complete, because there was what was moving back and forth. There was the recognition that everyone in the room I was in, and the environment that I was in, and the locale I was in, and the earth that I was on, and the universe I was in, was me. And yet, it was the simultaneous manifestation of this emptiness. And I know I've showed this to you before in videos. To me, this is a really great example of it. So here's a hand in a piece of pin art. That's form. Each one of us might be a piece of pin, and we don't necessarily see all the rest of the universe. The hand might be the universe. And the mystical experience is the falling away of that which perceives all that until there's nothing there. Right? But it's a simultaneous expression of both. But they're not independent of each other. They're exactly the same. It's not two things. It's not two sides of a coin. There's only, well, what is there? And so it took some time over here to really, really see this, you know. And certainly with the help of the teacher I eventually worked with, whose name was Fred Davis, there was some great clarity that came from this. So the point is dropping the I can be it is transformative. Truly, when it really drops completely away, it's transformative. When the I starts to reemerge, It's what happens, what you do with it. In my case, I was grasping back at the experience. Adyashanti has a book called The End of Your World, which is all about the post awakening experiences that people have. And there's a lot of things that the ego might end up doing. There might be a sense of nihilism, that everything's meaningless and nothing matters. There might be a sense of grasping of the mystical experience. There might be a sense of superiority. I'm awake and you're not. But now this has to get investigated. And this is a long winded way of getting around to the point that the supposed experience of emptiness is still just one sided. What needs to be clearly seen is that emptiness, this mystical experience, is none other than the mundane. This is why in many Zen koans, as I started talking to you about in the previous video, this is why many Zen koans are always pointing to mundane objects. A monk was having a conversation with a famous Zen master by the name of Joshu. I don't recall the entire koan, but the point of the koan is Joshu asked the monk, "Did you eat?" The monk said, "Yes, master." And Joshu said, "Wash your bowls." The mundane. Wash your bowls. Other koans point to a grain of rice. A flower was held up. A finger was held up. A stick is hit, or a student is hit, or the stick makes a sound. Because as long as there's a sense of the mystical, we miss the fact that what is it that's mystical is none other than this. And what is none other than this? This. What is that? I can't tell you. I'm not going to say the phenomenal universe, form. That's misleading. Because what you are is this. And there's only one place left to go but to just be this. Oh, it just reminds me of my very first koan was a monk asked Joshu, Saint Joshu. Monk asked Joshu, "Does a dog have the Buddha nature or not?" And Joshu answered, "Moo." And now in the lineage that I was in, the Japanese version of Zen, in the White Plum lineage, Taizan Mizumi Roshi brought it over from Japan. Then John Daidalori, my first Zen teacher, was a student of Taizan Mizumi. The question is, we bring this to the teacher, recite the koan. Well, the dog had the Buddha nature. Joshu said, "Does the dog have the Buddha nature?" Joshu said, "Moo." Teacher would say, "What is moo? What is moo? What is it? What are you? What is moo? What is anything?" There's another koan, follow-up koan, where they call the 20 moo. You just recited moo 20 times. Moo, 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 moo. What's the answer to that? What is moo? And you were told, be moo. Be moo. Okay, we got some food cooking in the stove. I need to go, and the timer's going off. I will be right back again. This one has had a lot of interruptions. The mundane. This is it. This is what's being called. This is mystical. The oven's calling. I'll be right back. The mystical and the mundane. It's all right here. They're the same thing. Form and emptiness. The mystical is the mundane. But what stops you from experiencing the mundane as the mystical? Can you take a guess? A thought. A thought. As soon as a thought arises, you've separated yourself. Thought creates separation. Be mu was what John Daido Roshi used to tell the students. Tell me, be mu. I remember those early years. What are you talking about? What is mu? How can I be something I don't know what I am? Well, what it is. What is mu? And that's you saying, well, that's what you need to figure out. Just be mu. And I didn't realize how simple it was. Oh man, I had a strong mind and a thick head. Oh boy. What is mu? Be mu. I'm not going to tell you. It's right in front of you. Look in the mirror. I'm looking at myself on the screen, so I'm laughing at myself, which is you who's watching this. Be mu. How do I be mu? I don't know. 20 mu. 20 mu. Everything's mu. Well, express that. How do you express 20 mu? How do you express everything's mu? Remember, we said it's the nothing that's everything. You're nothing. You're emptiness. But yet you're everything. The mystical is the nothingness. The mundane is everything. How do you express that? Express it. Our minds get in the way and it creates a separation and we don't know what we're doing. And that's the irony is we got to get our minds out of the way. We got to drop the self. We got to drop the ego. Doesn't mean we don't pick it up later. Doesn't mean it's not always there. Thoughts can continue. Mystical experience, by the way, typically are when there really is a true dropping away. I mean, the most profound mystical experiences tend to be when people die. I mean, there is a death of the ego. It disappears. I was going to say literally. No, it's not literally because there's no ego. So how can it literally disappear? But the mind stream that creates separation of sense of self and others, the thinking processes that I point to my brain again, it shuts down. So what happens when all that shuts down? And sometimes it's instantaneous. Some of the best mystical experiences, that's what happens. There's a shutting down of the egoic function. What's left? That's what needs to be penetrated. What's left? And as long as you even ask the question, what's left, you won't get there. We use the mind to bring you to the edge of the abyss, but the only way to become the abyss, to have so quote unquote mystical experience is first to let go of the mind. The mind has to let go. The mind has to, how it happens, I can't tell you. I do some facilitation, and there are a series of very somewhat funny and humorous exercises. But eventually, the point is to bring you to the perspective of saying, okay, when I take everything away, let's take everything away one by one by one. Let's take it all away. What's left? There it is. And now let's put everything back in the context of what you've seen as what you are. And you realize that what you are hasn't changed and now includes everything that exists. And this actually brings me to the point I really wanted to bring up, because, and I'll credit another Zen teacher by the name of Jeff Kitsis, goes by Zen Master Bansang in a Korean lineage. And he and I have become good buddies. And because I was bringing up this point, and I was bringing up everything's awareness. And he said, well, everything's perception. Oh, he was looking at it from this perspective. I was looking at it from this perspective. And we spent a few minutes basically recognizing that perception and awareness are exactly the same thing. Because to say there's perception or awareness implies that there's something having a perception. There's something aware of an object of perception. Ultimately, they both disappear. Now, in communicating, we need to use language. And so we had a little fun getting to the point where, oh, well, what you're talking about is awareness. What I'm talking about is perception. And what you're talking about is perception. I'm talking about is awareness. And then it collapses. And then when that happens, and this is the punchline to all of this, when that happens, all sense of separation within the world of what we call the mundane world falls away. Because that's the just this. What's left? Just this. Just this. It's so simple. Only your minds make it differently. My mind made it difficult for decades. This body is 64 years old, turned 64 in just a couple of weeks. Took a hell of a long time. And it was unnecessary, and yet that's what it took. When that is reached, when that is really seen, there's nothing left to do. There's nothing left to seek. Seeking ends because there's nothing to find. It's the irony. Because the only place you will find your true nature is just look at what's, and again, dualistic here, but just look. Holding up a flower, a plant, coffee mug. Just look. Oak tree in the garden. Larch in the backyard. Clouds in the sky. And that's why a lot of the mystical teachers are very poetic. I have a little poetic streak. I could pull together some haiku on a moment's notice. But Rumi, read Rumi. Oh, just beautiful. Read Mooji, Mooji. He has an amazing way with words. Art. You ever see Jim Carrey's art? Jim Carrey doesn't exist. He'll be the first to tell you. But awakeness is fully present over there. And I say over there. Perception, awareness, one and the same. And when you really get that, then life just lives itself through these apparent bodies. There's no longer a you. And I will be the first to admit that doesn't mean that the I thought or even a sense of me arises. There's still conditioning that needs to be worked through. I've talked about this before. There's genetic conditioning, there's epigenetic conditioning, there's environmental conditioning. And everybody around you has a story of you. Sometimes it's very difficult to be nothing when everybody else has a story. But there's a great sense of liberation and freedom or divine nonchalance. Oh, the program that was from was called Dispatches from Elsewhere. Yeah, the program's okay, but I love that phrase, divine nonchalance. Does the tree outside worry about tomorrow or what's going to happen next? Is it going to get upset if there's a squirrel crawling along its tree branch or a bird lands on it? No. That tree is mystical and mythical. I'm sorry, and mundane. Mythical part. That's episode number 4 of this sequence. My dogs. Yeah, one's getting upset, thinks there's a storm coming, but that's just what's happening with that dog. The other one just doesn't seem to care. Or the other one downstairs. There's 3 of them here. Divine nonchalance. This is God manifested. What we perceive as the phenomenal universe, is divine emptiness manifested. And yet they're not separate from one another. And so when there's that, when the thoughts of me, the thoughts of I, and the thoughts of anything disappear, of even perception and awareness, of absolute and relative, of form and emptiness, when they really disappear, there's just this life living itself. So it's divine nonchalance, it's equanimity, it's freedom, it's liberation. It doesn't mean these things can't get sick or feel pain or get upset or angry or depressed. These things are going to do what they do. This is a long one. It's taken me a long point, literally, the me, to go away to reach this point in the life of this form, as it is to get to this point here. So let's see if I can link it back to mental distancing before I wrap this up, or in order to wrap this up. Because now there's no more mental distancing at all. In fact, where first I had you distance from your thoughts and then distance yourself from the I thought, now there's a complete and utter collapse onto itself. There's no distance. There's the punchline. There's no distance. None at all. None. No distance. No distance. So mental distancing, there's a thought. Drop the there's a thought. Thoughts arise. Drop the thoughts arise. That's a thought. Follow the divine nonchalance. Just be See, I can't help myself. It's so hard to try to point and to teach and to facilitate and guide you without using language that by its very nature is dualistic. Because now I'm talking about me talking to you. I'm talking to myself. There's no distance. No distance. Period. There's no distance. So there's no mental distancing. There's nothing to nothing that needs to distance itself from something else, because there's no difference between that which you are and what you perceive to be something else, whether it's your thoughts or perceptions or other life forms or your neighbor or anybody else or any other apparent creature on this planet or any star and nebula or quantum particle. So drop the idea of even a mental distance. It's useful to a point, but there's no distance. See it for yourself. So let's go back to the beginning. If you weren't transformed in some fashion by any of these talks, then follow a progression. Observe that you're not your thoughts. Observe that the I thought is still just a thought. The witness is just a thought. Now, the next step is dropping it all completely. Dropping the seeking, dropping the observer, observing the I thought, the observer questioning. You just drop it all. Well, there's no you to drop it. There's just a simple recognition, because it is so freaking simple. It's simple. It seems we'd make it difficult, but it's right here. There's nothing to practice. There's nothing to do. Just be. And you don't have to be, because being is being. This reminds me of one of those phone calls where the person on the other end just won't let you hang up. It's like there's an energetic impulse here that just won't let me stop. Oh boy. There's no distance. There's no separation anywhere. Anywhere. And as soon as the thought comes up that there is, then that creates the separation. There's no separation anywhere. Okay, I guess I better wrap this up. I've had fun. I hope you have. Oh boy.